At the time, it was something I just couldn't handle at all. I was such a shy person when I was younger. I think I still hold a bit of a grudge against the guy who called me the Son of God. It felt great to be part of this movement that was happening at the end of the 80s. I started going to a club called the Hacienda in Manchester, and I remember walking in there and acid house had arrived, and the energy in the room and the music and the smoke machines and the strobe lights, it was just absolutely wild. I'd never seen anything like it, and I immediately started going as often as I could and started buying records, and I just desperately wanted to be part of this. You know, we looked up towards the DJ booth and the DJs were like these gods up there, and I just wanted to see what was going on up there. And I luckily moved into a building that had one of the resident DJs living there, and we became buddies, and yeah, I started warming up for him, and I kind of got my lucky break that way. But there was an incredible energy in the music. It definitely felt like a subculture at the time. It definitely felt like it was kind of, I mean, everyone grew their hair long. It felt like a kind of parallel to the hippie movement of the sort of end of the 60s. Counterculture, you know, it felt great to be part of this kind of almost secret club, you know. It certainly wasn't a commercial thing, but then at the beginning of the 90s, you know, everyone started having hit records, you know, the Orbital, people like that being on top of the pops, and you know, it got very big and very successful, and it didn't get that international. It was very much a British thing, you know. It's like we'd imported house music and techno from the States, and then it had just had this huge impact on the culture, you know, on the youth culture in Britain at the time. So it's amazing to be part of it. You know, I was 18 in 1988, so it was like I was primed.
And do you think that's changed for the better now? Obviously back then it was a lot more raw, disorganised.
Certainly raw, disorganised.
Illegal.
Not much of it was legal. There's not much health and safety. It's just got so much bigger now, and it had to kind of, once it got to a certain size, it had to be kind of regulated, really. You know, illegal parties are getting to like 40, 50,000 people. You know, yeah, it kind of had to be regulated. So yeah, it's very different now. The music's still there, and the music still has the kind of power and the impact. It's just the scene itself isn't really kind of what it was, you know.
Do you miss those days?
I mean, it's hard to talk about that and say, oh yeah, that was better or this was different, and because I was 18 then as well, so of course it was just, I was seeing the world through the you know, the eyes of an 18-year-old, so everything was wonderful, amazing, fantastic, new, shiny. You know, I've been DJing now for close to 30 years, so, you know, I've kind of been through quite a bit and a bit of a journey, so it's very different for me now, you know. My DJing now it's kind of a different thing, you know. I mean, I think when I was 18, I used to literally wake up in the morning and just practice DJing at home for 10, 12 hours a day. It used to drive my neighbours and my friends just crazy, but that's all I wanted to do, you know. Now I've kind of got older, I've got kind of different commitments, you know, going in the studio, I have a family, and you know, the actual job of DJing becomes a lot more about travelling and a lot of other things involved. So yeah, it's not quite the kind of 18-year-old commitment that I had back then, so it's different, And yeah, of course I miss the freedom that I had back then, but it's, you know, I've had an incredible career out of this. I had no idea back then that this would lead into a lifetime career, and it's been an incredible journey. It's been an amazing journey for me.
Do you think there's a disconnect now between people who want to be DJs? Back then it was kind of all about the music, and now because of people like you there is a kind of sort of godlike status to it, and you know, there's so much more involved, social media, marketing. It's not just about playing music.
Sure, I think there was a lot more mystery back then about where this music came from, who was behind it, how it was made, you know, who the DJs were. There was just, no one really knew anything. There was no community connection, there was no database of information about it. There was nobody who'd actually done this before as well, so you couldn't say, oh, I think these days, you know, a lot of people getting into the scene, they might see a DJ, their Instagram account with a private jet and, you know, living this lifestyle, and they're like, I want that lifestyle, and that's the reason they're getting into it, and the music is just kind of a vehicle for them to get there. So there's that end of things, but then, you know, there's the other side of things on the underground where you get these, you know, guys coming out of the scenes in Europe, in Berlin, where they're just so dedicated to DJing long sets, playing music that's very hard to find, that you can only get at certain record shops in Berlin, and really being dedicated to the craft. So, you know, it's grown up in both directions, you know. There are still very dedicated people doing this job.
When you were first starting out, you got called the Son of God. Was that helpful, or did you find that that kind of gave you this pressure?
At the time, it was something I just couldn't handle at all. I was such a shy person when I was younger, and it kind of sent me a bit sideways, to be honest. When people started recognizing me and asking for autographs and just coming up and talking to me, I was so kind of insecure and shy at the time that I just really didn't take it very well. It took me a few years to get my head around the fact that I had some sort of fame attached to me, and it was something I was really uncomfortable with at the beginning. I hated it, in fact, you know. So, yeah. It wasn't something I took that well, really. I think I still hold a bit of a grudge against the guy who called me the Son of God, the journalist. Yeah, thanks for that, mate.
Do you think there's more pressure on people like you? Because obviously you are idolised. Do you think there's a pressure on you to behave a certain way? Do you feel like it's hard just to be yourself sometimes?
I've got so used to this being Sasha the DJ. I do have sort of two characters, two egos. You know, when I'm at home and, you know, and I'm living my kind of normal family life, I'm kind of one person, and I definitely put on a, you know, when I'm going to work, it's like, okay, I kind of switch into that mode. And yeah, you got to be professional. You got to, you know, turn up on time. You got to make sure you deliver the goods when you're playing. It's very different now, you know, with social media, everything's scrutinized, you know, every word you say is written down and published online, you know, every photograph, every action, it's just everything's documented. And, you know, when I started off, it wasn't like that at all, you know. So I guess there was a lot more freedom then to act how, you know, how you wanted. And yeah, I think the whole social media side of things is just, everyone's become so hyper aware of everything that, yeah, it makes people act differently.
So obviously you started your days in sometimes illegal raves.
Yeah.
And now you're filling huge venues with an orchestra.
Right.
How is that? Is that a weird jump for you?
The whole live thing's come out of, it came out of working on an album I did when I was in LA for a short period of time called Scene Delete. I was kind of looking at trying to get into writing music for film and TV, and LA just wasn't really a very good fit for me personally. I didn't particularly like the place, and but I was working on a lot of this kind of cinematic music at the time, and then I was like, what am I going to do with this music? So I spoke to Late Night Tales, because it felt like that would be a really good label to release this music on, but they normally just did compilations, so they don't really do original music. So I spoke to the guys there, and I played them the music, and they got the whole concept. So, you know, because they've got such great contacts with other artists that have played kind of a lot of live music, they came to me and said, you know, would you be interested in putting the Scene Delete thing into a live show? And I'd never thought about taking my music and doing a live thing with it before. You know, I'd always considered my music to be club music, and I couldn't really translate it. But once I'd written this album, then I felt like, oh, actually, this is something we could perform. And then we started going back through all my old stuff and thinking, well, actually, if we took the beats out of that and reinvented that a bit, it would actually fit in this. So to be able to go back through my catalogue and some of the older stuff, some of the remixes that I've done, and present them in a live format, it's like a whole new, it's a whole new direction for my career. So it's, you know, 30 years in, to my DJing career, to suddenly have a whole new creative outlet and a new place to focus on is just such an amazing gift that I've got, that I've been given, you know, to be able to do this. And it's so exciting. I mean, I'm just spending a lot of time in the studio at the moment working on new music for the next round of live shows here in Brixton, and it's just, you know, I just feel like I've been given this amazing new opportunity, and at this point in my career it's just phenomenal. So yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't do it all those years ago, and that it's kind of happened now, really.
And do you find that the people that are coming are people sort of like old fans, like fans that have been with you the whole journey, or do you think you're...
There's definitely an element of that, you know. There's definitely some of the, especially the first shows that we did, there were people that were coming out, and that, you know, especially when we played some of the older stuff, they really liked that. But, you know, people are coming out to hear the new music as well, and it's, you know, it's a mixed crowd, but there's definitely an element of people coming out because they want to hear some of the older classics, because I never play classics. I never do sort of classics DJ sets, and I did one for the Train Spotting premiere in Berlin last year and got to play a load of like 1990s music. But it's something I really don't dig into very much. I get asked all the time to do classic sets. I don't know, I just don't, it doesn't feel comfortable going back. The reason I did the Train Spotting one is because they were really specific. They're like, we want the music that would have been played when the first Train Spotting film came out. So I kind of looked at the date of release, and then I only played music that was out sort of 6 months leading up to that release date. So I was really specific. My problem with classic sets is people want a track from 1990, they want a track from 98, they want a track from 2005, and they just want it all mixed up, big records, and like you never would have played a set like that, you know. Whereas for the Train Spotting thing, it was like, it actually allowed me to imagine that I was playing back in 1998. So
did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I had a great time. I can't believe how fast the music was back then. It's incredible. I was like, I can't believe I played this. Even on like -8, it's like 130 BPM. It's funny.
Nowadays there's a kind of such a wide scale of dance music.
Yeah. Including
things like EDM, which is obviously a lot more commercial, a lot more pop.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of music's helpful for the sort of wider scene? And you know, the big artists like Steve Aoki and
yeah, I mean, the thing that's happened really is that a lot of those electronic music festivals have become so big, you know, and the main stages, they are booking, I mean, they're pop acts, some of the EDM artists, you know, they're pop stars, pop acts, they're having big records on the Billboard chart in the States, and that's you know, they're doing well on the pop front, so they're getting booked on the main stage, but you know, that means that a lot of people are coming to those dance music festivals. The underground stages are getting fantastic production, and you know, there's a huge movement, you know, there's a huge movement with techno. There's some just boutique techno festivals that are sort of pulling in 15, 20, 25,000 people, so it's really healthy, you know. I don't particularly like the EDM music, but it's, you know, it's all part of it at the moment, and it's all pretty healthy on both ends of the spectrum, so I can't really complain. I don't have to like it.
So that's very healthy. What's your take on clubbing in the UK? Obviously, there's been quite a few club closures in the last decade.
Yep, there's been a few club closures. There's also been some openings as well, and you know, it's hard when a venue closes that you have such a historical attachment to. You know, I look at Space in Ibiza, for example, 27 years. It was my first club that I really loved when I first went to Ibiza, and it's the club that, you know, probably my favourite place to play in Ibiza over the years, and it's gone now, and it's tough. I can't even drive past the building really without feeling weird about it. But that just happens, you know. Usually the gentrification of a poorer area is usually the response, you know, that's responsible for clubs shutting down, and that's always going to happen. There's some great venues in London right now. Printworks is doing fantastic, 338. You know, so I know there've been venues shut down, but it seems pretty healthy. The thing I've noticed though, it's really hard for a lot of these, and it always has been, but it's even harder now, I think, for any club that has a regular schedule to function in the summertime. You know, there's so many festivals on, but you know, a lot of the festivals are catering for dance music, and yeah, there's a lot of access to it all over the UK. But I think in general the scene's pretty damn healthy. It's not quite as provincial as it used to be. When I first started DJing, I could kind of fill 3 months of my diary just going around the UK, playing in Bristol and yeah, you know, Newquay, you know, all over different places in Scotland. It's not quite as provincial as it used to be. People definitely kind of lean towards the bigger cities.
Why do you think that is?
I think the venues are probably the reason. You know, people, there's a great venue in Birmingham called Crane, you know, like I said, Printworks and Fabric in London. They can just get the lineups. And I also think that now that the scene's become so much more international, there was a period of time where I wasn't really traveling that much. So kind of, you know, playing in the UK was kind of my circuit. And then suddenly I'm getting booked in America and Australia, South America, Asia. So it's just, I think it's hard for those provincial clubs to pull in the talent, really, you know.
You've done a lot with Fabric before.
Yes.
And they almost shut down.
They almost shut down, but yeah, the public response to that was amazing, actually. It was great to see you know, a response like that actually have an effect. It was great.
Were you worried for a time that that would be the end
of
Fabric?
Yeah, I thought it was done. I really thought it was done. I had no idea that the power of the public getting behind petitions and turning up at hearings would actually have the effect. I thought the decision had already been made and it was done and I wouldn't ever get to play there again. So the fact that last month I got to play my Fabric, I released a Fabric CD number 99 and we did a launch party there and I played all night. And it's probably the best night I've had in there in 10 years. It was just incredible, the atmosphere, and just, it was like the old Fabric days when it first opened, so it's fantastic, it hasn't gone.
There seems in the UK at least to be a kind of push from the clubbing society at least to look at drugs from a sort of harm prevention kind of way rather than a we must stop this now. Do you think that needs to happen? I
think there's a lot of things happening right now within our industry, the music industry in general, that are positive things. I think anything that can help people take care of themselves, awareness, testing stations, so that people don't take stuff that's, you know, really bad, because I know there's just some terrible stuff being made and there's been some awful tragedies recently. So anything that helps people protect themselves. And then there's the awareness on the mental health side of things. I think there's been a big conversation happened recently, you know, again off the back of a terrible tragedy, you know, with Avicii's passing, but it's opened up a dialogue that just wasn't there before, you know. I mean, I've had some personal issues on the road with anxiety attacks and dealing with stress when I've been DJing over the years, but you know, that's my personal story really, and it's not something I want to kind of wave a flag about, but I think it's great that people are feeling like they can talk about things right now, because that wasn't actually there before. I think people felt embarrassed or ashamed to talk about the things that were going on, issues that they were having, because it can be a brutal lifestyle being on the road. There's a lot of isolation, and there's a lot of very late nights and very little sleep, and you know, you've kind of got to be in the, you know, you've got to learn how to protect yourself, you know. So the dialogues that are happening at the moment, I think, are giving people some tools, which is great. Is
that something that you had to learn the hard way?
Yeah, I had a few bumps in the road, yeah.
And do you think there's enough out there for, I guess, men as well as DJs? There is still that stigma of...
Yeah, but I think the stigma's been lifted quite a lot over the last 12 months. You know, IMS in Ibiza this year also ran a kind of wellness, a wellness kind of meeting of heads alongside the music conference there, and it was very well attended. And it just feels like people are talking about things and not feeling ashamed to talk about kind of issues, and that's just great, because, you know, obviously some of this stuff is difficult to talk about, you know, especially for men.